So next week we will have some gross games, we'll have some messy games, we'll have some games that challenge your brain, we'll have all kinds of different variety of stuff. You guys will find out from your small group leader later this week, if not by the end of tonight, which color you will be. Now when we break up teams, we're breaking you up by small group leader, pretty much so we can break up the juniors so they don't just yell at everybody the entire time. They can yell at each other from opposite sides. But we're going to break you up by small group, and we're going to try to keep the size as close as possible. But once the teams are made, it's down to you guys. Because the more people you invite, the more likely you are to win. When you invite people, you get more points for your team because you have more people on your team. Whoever has the most people get the most points based on the size of your team. So when I create the teams, they're going to be similar in number. But after that, it's up to you. You've got to invite friends. You got to bring people to come and just compete, have some fun. We will also be doing some Christmas cookies and stuff like that. Not gross ones, normal Christmas cookies. That way we have a little bit of food for you guys and just make an enjoyable night. So that's all coming next week. Same time, same place. It'll be right in here. So, but for tonight, I'm really excited as we talk about Christmas. We talk about what the true meaning of Christmas is. But before I get started with my message, would you go ahead and watch this video? So in order to get started with this talk, I want to start out by talking about expectations. Because I think expectations are something obviously we all have. And some of you guys may have high expectations on things, some of you may have low expectations on things. But for me, I have two rules in my life that I never set for myself, but if I do a little bit of self-reflection, I know that I follow these even though they may not be the best thing. The first one is I don't like to give definite answers. I don't ever like to tell people, yes, I'll get that done, no, or no, that won't happen, or yes, that's going to happen, because then I don't have to tell somebody that if it's going to happen and it doesn't happen and they're mad at me. I want to avoid that at all costs. I hate confrontation, and so if you ever ask me something, unless you are my boss, in which case I have to say, yes, it will get done, because that's my job. If it's outside of my job and you ask me something, I'll say, yeah, I'll do my best to do that. I'll try my hardest to get that done. I don't like to give definites because I don't like to make people upset or let people down. The second one is I like to set low expectations for myself and for others around me. I think I do this because, again, for the same reason, I don't want people to expect so much out of me that if I don't reach that expectation, they're mad. And then for me, I don't want to set high expectations for somebody else because if they don't reach them, I don't want to be disappointed. And I think if we really think about our lives, I think a lot of us probably set low expectations for other people and sometimes low expectations for ourselves. But there's one time every year where I feel like everybody's expectations are at an all-time high. Whether you normally have low expectations for something or you have high expectations for something, whenever this time of year comes around, we have high expectations. And that's Christmas. I feel like everybody gets so excited for Christmas. Everyone's ready to play some Mariah Carey and ready to just jam out to some Christmas music. They love decorating their house. They love giving gifts. They love receiving gifts. Everybody is so excited for Christmas. And I got to tell you, I wasn't always excited for Christmas. Like, I had good Christmases as a kid. I got the stuff that I mostly wanted. I didn't really have high expectations for Christmas until the year 2006. I was 9 years old, and like I said, I got a lot of the things I wanted for Christmas, but it was nothing like ever was like, that was like, this thing's gonna stick with me for the rest of my life because I loved it that much. But in 2006, I got a gift from my family that I didn't expect to ever get. I never asked for it because I knew it wasn't possible. At that time, my parents did not have a ton of money. I didn't think that any of it was possible to ever get one, so I didn't even ask for one. I didn't even think about getting one, but I ended up getting the best gift I think I ever received on Christmas, and that was this. It is the original launch edition PlayStation 3, which obviously, now you guys know, we're a month into PlayStation 5, which I doubt pretty much anybody in this room has gotten one because that's been such a pain. But in 2006, I got a PlayStation 3. Now, this thing is massive. It weighs like 15 pounds. And honestly, compared to what we have now, it's a hunk of junk. But when I got it, I opened this box, and all I saw was, it's the same lettering that's on top of it. I'm not going to lift it up because I only have one hand. Like I said, it's 15 pounds. I don't want to drop it on the ground. Had the same lettering, just said PlayStation 3 on it. I remember I stood up and I ran around my parents' house just cheering. I was so excited because I had the PlayStation 2. I kind of knew the PlayStation 3 exists, so I'm like, I'm never going to be able to get one. They were like $500 on launch day, and I'm like, there's no way I'll ever get one. But the first Christmas they were available, my parents got me one. And I was so excited, and that to this day was the best gift I ever received, to where I knew I would never get rid of it. It's been sitting in my parents' house now for years. My parents just recently moved, and my dad texted me and said, hey, I'm going to throw this PlayStation 3 away unless you come and get it. I'm like, that was the best Christmas present ever. I can't let you throw that thing away. So I went and picked it up, and I was like, I'll use it for my message. But I was so excited to get this that every year after that, I had an expectation for Christmas. Like, it was like, that was the coolest thing ever. I want to feel that feeling again. I was pretty much for the rest of my life, I've never been so surprised by anything that anyone's ever given me than I was when I received this gift. And so my expectations were set so high for Christmas every year after that. Then ultimately you become an adult, and all of a sudden you're getting like, 2 front tires for Christmas or something like that. Really practical things, some jeans. And for some reason, you're really excited about that. But, so expectations have now as an adult dropped, but all the way through my childhood, I was really excited for Christmas. And I think the funny thing is, when you think about Christmas, and you think about the reason why we celebrate this holiday, and I think most people who are sitting here in this room would know, yeah, we celebrate Christmas because it's the birth of Jesus. That's why we celebrate Christmas, right? Yeah, it's the birth of Jesus. That's why we talk about it in the church. That's why on Christmas Eve, my family dresses up and we show up to Christmas. The only time my parents go to church is on Christmas Eve, and we have to do it. We've done it my entire life. It's because it's the birth of Jesus. And so I feel like there's always been this excitement around Christmas, but I want to go back to what we would consider the first Christmas, the actual birth of Jesus. When we go back, we think about the expectations that were set for Jesus before he was even born. If you look back in the Old Testament, which is the beginning of the Bible, it's the first half, even though it takes up more than half of the Bible. It's the whole first part of the Bible. They talk about a coming king. There's these things called prophecies where they're talking about Jesus will one day be here. And here are some of the words that they use to describe Jesus. One of them is a chief cornerstone. This would be the stones that builders would use in the corner of any building. These are what the foundation would hold up the building. They called they called this coming king one day, this who Jesus would one day be, the chief cornerstone. They called him Emmanuel, which means God with us. They had the expectation that there was somebody who was going to be a God with them. They called him the Mighty One. They called him the Redeemer. They called him a wonderful counselor. They called him the mighty God. They called him the everlasting Father. They called him the Prince of Peace. Ultimately, they would call him the Messiah, which means promised deliverer. The people of Jesus' time that were around even before Jesus had high expectations for Christmas. Obviously, they didn't call it Christmas then. There was no reason to have Christmas because Jesus had yet to be born. But they were waiting for this coming Messiah. And they had all these words that they used to describe him. And their expectations were great. They thought, this man's going to be a king. He's going to show up, and I would have pictured him coming down from heaven. I would have thought that this guy, he's so special. There's no way he just would have been born like any one of us. He was going to come from heaven, just all of a sudden, just be here one day. Or they thought, maybe instead of a king, he'd come as this, we call him a mighty warrior. Maybe he'd come as a mighty warrior. He would just come and he'd be bigger than Goliath. He'd be huge. He'd be the largest person ever. And he would just come and conquer the lands and bring balance back to the world. They had huge expectations for Jesus. And that's almost not fair, isn't it? Like, he hasn't even been born yet. And you're already going to put all these ideas, all these standards, you're going to have all these expectations for somebody who you don't even know how he's going to show up. They were waiting for this Messiah. They were waiting for something great. But what did they get? They got a baby who was born like anybody else. Well, not quite, because his mom claimed to be a virgin. His mom said, I've never had sex before, yet I am pregnant. And her husband was a carpenter, not a king, not a warrior, not a general in any army. Her husband was a carpenter, she was a virgin, and they were from, her husband was, whose name is Joseph, was originally from a place called Bethlehem, which is pretty much a nowhere place on the map. And this Messiah is supposed to come from this. He's not a king. He's not a warrior. He makes freaking furniture. He's a carpenter. He maybe builds houses. What is so special about this? And then on top of that, when they had to go back to Bethlehem, they took a whole journey on a donkey. I'm sure many of you have heard this story of taking a journey on a donkey, and then they finally get to Bethlehem. They get back home, and when they get to Bethlehem, there's no place for them to stay. There's no hotels open. They called them inns. There's nowhere for them to go. And so ultimately, they ended up finding a place pretty much just in a barn next to a bunch of farm animals. To make it even better, they were staying with farm animals, and then she goes into labor. And so she goes into labor. She has this baby. She puts him in a manger, which is pretty much just a small trough in which you would feed animals in. And there's your Messiah. That's it. There he is, laying in a barn with a bunch of animals with his parents. Originally, when they thought, if this Jesus, if this Messiah is to be born like a normal man, then there's going to be millions of people around to see it. They'll know that the mom will know that this is the Messiah. They'll know that this is the person we've been waiting for, and the richest of the rich will be there for the birth. But who was there? You had some shepherds who were pretty much as low as slaves in their time who were there. So, and normally shepherds were known as being a little bit crazy because they sat in fields and talked to sheep all day. You had 3 wise men who actually, if you look into it, came later than the birth of Jesus. They weren't even there when Jesus was actually born. And so you had a bunch of shepherds, you have a bunch of animals, you have mom and dad. That doesn't seem like the richest of the rich and millions of people coming around to watch this birth. Okay, so when he's born, though, we'll celebrate, right? Everybody's going to be excited that this promised deliverer has come, This person is going to restore balance to our world. We're going to set huge expectations. We're going to party. We're going to celebrate this. We might party for months. We may even party for years, because when this guy comes, everything will change. Yet, there was no celebration. In fact, the king, who everyone thought would be the one throwing the party, was actually so afraid of this Messiah and hearing that he was born that he decided to say, you know what, among all my land, all the babies must be killed. And Jesus barely makes it out with his life. Little baby Jesus barely makes it out with his life while babies are killed because a king is afraid that somebody's coming to take his throne. The expectations were so high for Jesus, and he didn't meet any of them. Now, I know for you and for me, I can for sure speak for myself. When I don't meet expectations, I shut down. If there are multiple things I don't meet expectations on, I get real, just depressed inside. I no longer want to perform in any way. I can't imagine what would have gone through the mind of Jesus knowing that this is not what people expected. He didn't give them the PlayStation 3 treatment. He didn't set new expectations for anything. But he broke the expectations of every single person. See, what they were expecting was a king. But what they got was a baby. What they were expecting was a celebration. But what they got was essentially genocide. What they were expecting was to have the richest of the rich there. But instead, the people who are hardly part of society got to experience it first. Jesus, from his birth, shatters expectations. And if you go through the rest of Jesus' life, he breaks the expectations of everybody. Even though he was born in a manger, even though he was born of a virgin, even though he was born as normal as you could physically be born, people still had these high expectations for Jesus, and he still, throughout his entire life, had to find a way to break them. Because what we expect from Jesus doesn't matter. The expectations that we set for Jesus, the great thing is, he's greater than those. Jesus overcomes our expectations for him and ourselves. Jesus came to break what we thought was true. And he does this for his entire life. And so why Christmas? Why this season? Why? I understand that, yeah, okay, cool, we celebrate his birth. But this was the beginning. This is when it all started. This is when the Messiah, this is when the promised deliverer, this is when the chief cornerstone, this is when Emmanuel, this is when the mighty one, the Redeemer, this is when Jesus was born. And this is when everything changed. And it started with the breaking of expectations. So I have a simple question for you tonight. I want you to think to yourself, Jesus, through his entire life, broke expectations. And I could probably do 15, 20, 30 different sermons on different times when Jesus broke the expectations of what people had for him. I could go through and point out different stories all throughout the Bible where Jesus is breaking expectations, and it starts on day one. Jesus broke expectations his entire life until the day that he died and until the day that he again rose to heaven. But today, what expectations is Jesus trying to break in your life? What expectations are you maybe setting for yourself? Are you setting on others? Or even, are you setting on Jesus that maybe Jesus is trying to break right now? For some of you, it could simply be something about school. Maybe you have such a high expectation for yourself that if you get anything that's in like a 95 range, you're not doing well. You got to start doing your extra credit. You got to start studying harder than you've ever studied before, because God forbid you get a 95 in a class. Or maybe for some of you, it's, my receiving yards this year were lower than they were last year. Or I need to score as many baskets as I can this year in basketball. That way I can get that scholarship. Or in any sport, it's like my performance was a little bit lower. I need to work harder so I can be better, in order to get that scholarship one day. Or maybe it's the expectation that you have on your sister, like she's so young and she doesn't get it and she ticks me off all the time. Why can't she just be mature and figure things out? Maybe it's the expectation that you're setting on your family, that there are issues going on and you're like, just fix your stinking issues. What expectation are you setting? Maybe you're setting an expectation on Jesus that you need to fix my life right now. I need you to fix my life now. And it's not happening. What expectation are you setting that Jesus is here to break? Jesus did it throughout his entire ministry, his entire life. He shattered expectations. Do you think that stopped when he wasn't on earth anymore? I don't think so. I think today, Jesus is trying to break expectations in your life. Jesus is trying to take something that you see as negative, that is going against you, and he's trying to take it and have your mind change. Because the plan that you have for yourself isn't necessarily the plan that God has for you. The plan that you are trying to create in your mind, that you have to do this in order for it to work out, may not be the thing that Jesus has for you. What expectation are you setting for yourself that Jesus is trying to break? We break out into our small groups. I want you to think about this question. Because guys, expectations, they're tough. To feel like you have an expectation that is nearly impossible to meet, that's tough. Jesus didn't meet the expectations of people. But Jesus made his own expectations. And Jesus is making an expectation for you. And I guarantee you, it's one that you can reach. I guarantee you, it's something that is actually tangible in your life. I guarantee you the expectations you have for yourself are way more strict and way harder to reach than the expectations that Jesus had for you. Because ultimately, if you broke Jesus' expectations down to one thing, you broke it down and you just took it to one word that Jesus expects out of each and every one of you, it's love. He expects love. Now, I know that maybe for some of you it's like, oh, that sounds easy. Maybe for some of you that sounds hard. And we talked about this recently, where loving people can be difficult. Loving people can be hard. Loving people can be easy. But Jesus broke everybody's expectation, and he did it with love. What expectation in your life could be fixed today because of love? Loving somebody, loving Jesus, loving yourself. Break your expectations. Change what is expected out of you and do it the way that Jesus did it. Do it with love. So we're going to break out into our small groups. They're going to be able to ask some questions, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Christmas means, and if you have questions about that, I know your small group leaders can answer those to anybody who's kind of new to the whole idea of even Jesus. So if you have questions that you want answered, I'm always somebody you come and talk to about those. I know a little bit too much and have read it a few too many times to where I can answer some of those questions and can be that for you, but your small group leaders can as well. So once we break out into these, think about your expectations. The ones you're setting for yourself, the ones that you feel like have been set for you. Figure them out, and let's break them down. let's shatter some expectations tonight. Would you guys pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you that this season we get to celebrate the birth of your Son. I thank you that we get to just come together and we get to talk about the expectations that were broken. We get to talk about how you came to not follow what we expected, but to create your own standard, to create your own expectations, and to set expectations for us. I pray that we figure out how to love more, that we figure out how to be loving towards more people, how we can be loved by you more, we can love you more, and how we can even have self-love even more. I pray that our small groups go great. We have challenging discussions, and that we're able to come back here next week and we're able to have a great time and play some competitive games and hopefully see some juniors lose. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.